Hi, everyone, and welcome to the next biology session for Fascinate, which is called Make a Microbe. So for those of you who were at the DNA session earlier today, you know who I am. I'm Jill. I work at Aston University, and I'm a guide leader. And for those of you who are new, I'm Jill. Hi, nice to meet you. So hopefully everyone has this piece of paper printed off. So this is your worksheet for this particular session. If you don't have this printed off, that's absolutely fine. You just need to have a piece of paper that you can draw on and some kind of, I've got a big bin here full of felt markers and colored pencils and crayons. And you might also want to have something sticky. I've got some glue and a brush to use, or if you have a glue stick or any other kind of wet glue, or you could also use sellotape or blue tack if you want, just to sort of give different gifts to your microbes as we make them. But before we get into making our own microbes, maybe we should learn a little bit about the microbes themselves so we know what we're talking about. So I think everyone is aware by now that there are a lot of microbes that are not very good for us. So if you think about different microbes that make us sick, so the bacteria that causes food sickness, for example, if everyone's ever been on holiday and caught a nasty little microorganism, that can either be a bacteria or a virus. Obviously, the virus that causes COVID-19, which is called SARS-CoV-2, that's not a very nice virus. We don't like that virus, and we don't like other respiratory viruses that make us sick in our lungs, like influenza. Those are not great microbes to have around. But on the other hand, there are a lot of really, really good microbes that make us healthy and do a lot of really important things for us. So there's a lot of helpful microorganisms that help us make food. So if you eat bread obviously you wouldn't be drinking beer, but bread is a really good example because soft and fluffy and really delicious to eat. There's a lot of bacteria that are used in the production of food as well. So if you think about yogurt, if you like to eat yogurt, there's bacteria in that. There's bacteria in a lot of cheese making. Marmite, there's yeast in that, just similar to the yeast that's used to make bread. What else do we have here? Corn. I don't know if anyone's eaten corn, but that is a type of fungus. It's a type of microorganism that is produced on an industrial scale and is a really good substitute for eating meat in your diet. So corn's really, really good. I really like it. So yeah, just so you know, for example, if we're talking about yeast, that's why you need to keep bread warm when you're making bread. I don't know if anyone's tried to make bread at home. I started making bread at home very early in lockdown because it seemed like a good thing to do. And then I very quickly got tired of it because I don't make super, super good bread. It's just nicer buying it from the bakery. But when you're making bread, you need to keep the yeast nice and warm because that warmth allows the yeast that you've put into the bread dough to proliferate, to make many copies of that yeast. So you get yeast that buds into other yeast and you get a lot of yeast building up, and they feed on the sugar that's in the flour. So flour is made out of a complex sugar all chained in together, and the yeast is able to feed on those sugar molecules and make that gas, that carbon dioxide, and that makes the bread dough nice and fluffy. So when next time you look at bread, look for all the little holes in your bread, and you can know now that those are made by the gas produced by yeast as the bread was being made. So hopefully everyone's also heard of vaccines. So these are really important right now, especially given the pandemic, that we need to have a good vaccine that can protect people from this virus. And vaccines are often made from viruses as well. So I got the AstraZeneca vaccine back in May. And that vaccine is made out of a virus called an adenovirus. So for this particular vaccine, it's not a dead virus. It's not a dead like COVID virus. It's just a little tiny piece of the COVID virus, a protein that's expressed on the outside of the COVID virus that goes into this vaccine. And then the vaccine teaches your immune system what to look for. So now that I've had my vaccine, if the COVID virus gets into my body, my immune system will recognize it right away and hopefully fight it off before I even feel sick. I might not even know that I've had the virus in my body. Hopefully my immune system works really, really fast. So the immune system is really complex, but it's really, really important. So I think all you need to know now is that vaccines kind of give a a heads up to your immune system and tells it what to look out for so it can fight off nasty microorganisms that we don't like to have in our bodies. So there's another little graphic there on different bacteria and where they're found. So there are, yes, harmful microorganisms. So these are bacteria that can make you feel sick. So hopefully everyone knows that you should never eat raw chicken because there's a bacteria called salmonella that's found on raw chicken and that can make you sick. There's another bacteria called E. coli that can also be found on raw meat. So you need to make sure your meat's really well cooked if you are a meat eater. There are different funguses like ringworm and athlete's foot that can infect the skin and can make your skin really itchy and it looks kind of bad as well. There's red algae. Those aren't very good. Those live in the sea and produce toxins that can make us sick. And if anyone's had a strep throat, a really, really sore throat that sticks around for a little bit longer than you think it might, that you really should, that's often caused by a bacteria called streptococcus, and that can make us feel sick as well. But on the other side here, we have all of these beneficial microorganisms. So the antibiotic penicillin is made by a fungus. Blue cheese is delicious, and that's got a fungus in it as well. And we mentioned before the bacteria that turn milk into yogurt. Those are really good for us. And there's similar bacteria that live in your intestines and that help you digest your food. So it's really good to have these bacteria. And a lot of the good bacteria that are in yogurt actually help our digestive systems work a little bit better as well. And then finally, we talked about yeast for making bread. So for this particular exercise, I would like everyone to design their own beneficial microbes. So on this worksheet here, I've got some ideas of what these different microbes can do. So let's go through them one at a time. The first one here is a virus. So hopefully you can see that virus. That is a specific type of virus, what's shown in the picture there. And those particular kind of viruses hunt down bacteria and kill them. So remember when I talked about the salmonella bacteria and the E. coli bacteria that's on your food? You could use viruses to hunt down those bacteria that make you sick and kill them, and then you wouldn't actually get sick because the virus would get rid of all of the bacteria. So that's what I've got here with a little magnifying glass there. I have the viruses can find those bacteria that make us sick. I put the hammer there because they can smash those bacteria and kill them and make them go away so they don't make us sick. And then some of these viruses are super, super smart, and they can actually remember what bacteria they've looked for in the past and what they've done to get rid of it that worked really, really well. So they actually have a little bit of a memory function. So those are pretty cool viruses. So I have made an example of one of these. I have made a virus that I'm calling Malaria Hunter. So hopefully everyone's heard of the disease malaria. It gives you a fever, and it's usually found in tropical areas, and it comes from getting bitten by an infected mosquito. It's a really, really nasty sickness, and a lot of people get ill with malaria every year. Now, malaria is tough because it's not the same kind of microorganism like what we've been talking about so far. It's actually a little parasite, a tiny little animal that lives in your blood cells. So it's really hard to get medicines in there. So I think that maybe we can make a virus, a special malaria hunting virus that can get into our cells and get rid of that malaria parasite once it's gotten into our cells. I think that would be really, really cool. So it can find those cells that have a malaria parasite in them. Hopefully you can see I've drawn it there. It can smash that malaria parasite and get rid of it. And then it can also remember for a bacteria, the example that I've made, I'm calling this one a sugar sensor. So this is an idea from a friend of mine at work, Dr. Jonathan Cox, and this was his idea. I thought it was a really, really good idea. So this is a type of bacteria that you could put into something like yogurt or something that you eat, and the bacteria would live in your intestines. And what this bacteria would do is measure how much sugar you have in your blood. So hopefully you've heard of a disease called diabetes, which happens when the blood the sugar level in your blood is out of control. It can make you really sick, and it can affect your eyes, and it can affect your skin, and really just makes you feel rubbish. So what this bacteria would do is it would sense the sugar level in your blood, and when the sugar level gets too high, it would make a chemical called insulin. And that insulin basically helps your cells deal with sugar a little bit better. So it would help someone who has diabetes keep their sugar level under control so they don't feel rubbish. And finally, I also decided to make a yeast, which is the third one that's on there. So these yeast cells are the ones that are most like our cells. They have a nucleus, whereas a bacterial cell does not have a nucleus. So these are the biggest ones out of the three. And this is an idea from my friend, Dr. Alan Goddard, who I also work with. And he works with a lot of yeast, and he does some really interesting things with them. This particular idea, what we have is a plastic muncher. So this yeast finds plastic so that, maybe we haven't recycled it, or we've recycled it part of the way. And this yeast can take that plastic, chop it up into smaller chemicals, and use those chemicals to build something that's more useful. So it could build maybe a different type of plastic, or those different molecules can be used to make something completely different, like different medicines that we need to keep ourselves healthy. So there's lots of different ideas that you can do for this particular activity. So I've put up on the screen just some ideas of what these different microbes can be shaped like. So if you want to draw your own, you can do that. But yeah, you can use this template if you want. You can use the different icons that I've put on the worksheet if you want, or you can come up with whole new ones. So I think while we're doing this, we've got a couple more minutes. We can do this together. And if you have any questions, you can pop your questions into the YouTube chat, and I can answer your questions that way. And my friend Rebecca can help out with that, hopefully. So yeah, go ahead and pop your questions into the YouTube chat, and I'm going to go ahead and make another one of these organisms. I've decided I'm going to make another yeast, because I think these yeasts are pretty cool. I really like the way the yeast is drawn as well. So you see the edge of the yeast? Very edge of the yeast has these little hairs sticking out. That's actually what yeast colonies look like under the microscope. So I thought whoever drew this did a really good job. They know what yeast looks like. So I'm just going to color in my yeast. I'm going to color this one blue, I think. And think about what I want this yeast to do. So yeasts are very cool. So my friend Alan that I mentioned before, he does a lot of work on biofuels. So hopefully everyone knows what biofuels are. I think everyone is well aware of global climate change and all of the bad things that are happening to the planet because we're using too many fossil fuels. So hopefully everyone knows what a fossil fuel is. So if you don't, those are things like petrol and natural gas and coal that have been in the ground for a really, really long time. Now, some people say that fossil fuels came from dinosaurs. That's not completely accurate. Most of the fossil fuels that we burn are actually derived from plants that were much older than the dinosaurs. And they've been around in the ground for a very, very long time. Now, the problem is when we burn those fuels, we release all of that really old carbon back into the atmosphere. And that helps trap some heat from the sun in the atmosphere, and that warms up the planet, and that is leading to all sorts of nasty problems that we really do not want to have to deal with. So one example of that is where I'm originally from in Canada. In the very far north of Canada, the ground is starting to thaw. So this is ground that's been frozen for hundreds, maybe thousands of years, and the ground is starting to thaw now, and it's causing a lot of problems. So what I'm going to do with my particular yeast in this exercise, I'm going to use the chopping and the pumping icons. So I've cut those out. So my yeast is going to use organic material. So organic material is something that's coming from something alive. And the organic material that my yeast is going to use is going to be agricultural waste. So I think that's a really important one. So a really good example of this is the stems of corn plants. So hopefully everyone has seen sweet corn and how it grows. So hopefully you know the corn comes in ears, and those grow really high up off the ground. And the bottom part of the corn, the green part of the corn, the stalks, no one eats that. Animals don't eat it. It just sort of either gets, put back into the ground as fertilizer, or it just gets wasted. And no one actually uses that particular part of the corn plant. So I'm going to grow a yeast that specifically likes to eat that part of the corn. So that green part of the corn that no one really uses for anything else. So I'm going to glue my little scissors onto my yeast here. So I like using this kind of craft glue. I like to use a brush to put it on because it's nice and I get it exactly where I want it to go. All right, so I've glued my scissors onto my little yeast, and that yeast job is to cut up that agricultural waste, that green part of the corn, and to make it into something more useful. And that more useful thing that we're going to have is biodiesel, so specifically ethanol. So it's a type of alcohol. It's the same kind of alcohol that's in, a beer or a wine or, whatever the adults like to drink when they're relaxing. It's that same kind of chemical, but you can actually use ethanol to run the engine in your car instead of petrol. So instead of this being a petrol pump, this is now going to be a bioethanol pump. So I'm going to color this in a little bit. I think I'm going to color it red. And my yeast is going to take that agricultural waste, that part of the corn that no one actually wants, and is going to convert that agricultural waste into bioethanol. And this has a lot of advantages. So bioethanol is better for the environment than burning fossil fuels. Remember that fossil fuel, that carbon is really, really old. It's older than the dinosaurs. And we don't want that carbon going back into the environment. Now with biodiesel, the carbon has been taken out of the air because that corn needed to grow. So if you think about when that corn was growing over the last year, the corn was taking carbon dioxide out of the environment to build its cells. So it was sucking carbon out of the air. Now, when we put it back into the air after burning it, that is new carbon. So it's carbon that was taken out last year and we're putting it in this year. So we're kind of maintaining the balance. So it's a different balance than taking that really, really old carbon from millions of years ago and putting it into the air now. So it's sort of a quicker recycling of the carbon. So I've colored in my biofuel pump. I've made it nice and jazzy and red and purple, so it looks really pretty. And I'm just gonna glue that on to my little yeasty beastie here. So the yeast knows what to do. So the yeast knows now that it will chop up that corn waste that no one wants for anything else. And it's then going to process that corn waste and make it into bioethanol. And then we can use that bioethanol to fuel our cars and maybe buses and maybe even larger vehicles like lorries. If we do enough research, we get these kind of engines really efficient. And that way we have less old carbon going into the environment. And that in the long run will be much better in terms of keeping the planet healthy and safe for your generations and all the future generations to come. So I think we've pretty much run out of time. We've got about 10 minutes left, actually. So if you have any questions, go ahead and put them into the chat. If you have any ideas for what these different microorganisms can do, I'd really love to hear them. So you can put that into the chat as well. If you have any questions or any ideas, go ahead and do we have anything coming into the chat, Rebecca?
We haven't got anything in the chat at the minute, although if anyone is watching this afterwards and they want to write their question in the comments, we can also answer them later for them too.
Yeah, you can absolutely do that. I would really love to see what everyone thinks of this particular activity because it's the first time I've done it. We can think about what maybe we want to do with this bacterium as we're kind of sitting here. See, let me cut out this bacterium and think about what we might want to make this bacteria do. So I like the trainers icon. I haven't used that one yet. I think I'm going to use that one on this bacteria. So let's think about where we want this bacteria to go and what we want this bacteria to do. So I think I mentioned before that we have bacteria that naturally live in our guts, in our intestines. And those are really, really good bacteria because they help us digest our food, but they also help us keep bad bacteria under control. So I'm going to make a special kind of what we call a lactobacillus. So those are the bacteria that are in milk products like yogurt. So lacto is from milk. So hopefully if anyone is lactose intolerant, you'll know that lactose is the sugar that's in milk. So we want a lactobacillus, and I'm going to give this lactobacillus the trainers because I want this lactobacillus to run really, really fast into the intestines and to sit there in the intestines and chase down those nasty bacteria that we don't want in our guts. So things like salmonella, which is from raw chicken that doesn't make us feel very nice. There's lots of nasty bacteria that can get into your guts and make you feel not very nice at all. Hopefully, if you've had food poisoning, you understand what I'm talking about. I hope you've never had food poisoning. I had food poisoning really bad once when I was on holiday in the Caribbean with my family. And it ruined the last day of my holiday. I didn't get to go to the beach at all because I was sat in my hotel room feeling really, really ill all day. So you do not want food poisoning. So there's lots of different bacteria that are in the environment, either in our food or in our water. There's different kinds of bacteria that can be in water. So if anyone's heard of a disease called cholera, that happens when you drink contaminated water. So hopefully when you ever go camping, either with your families or with Girl Guides, you'll remember this and you won't drink water that hasn't been processed properly. And if you're not sure, you should always ask an adult, but that's one really good reason not to drink water out of a stream, for example, or out of a pool if you're camping, because you don't know what's living in that water. And you don't want something that's going to make you sick. So something like cholera, that would be pretty awful. So I'm just going to color in my trainers. I think I'm going to make them this light blue color. And that is going to tell my bacteria to run right to my large intestine, which is where those nasty bacteria might be hanging out, and just to sit there and wait. And if they do show up, to help get rid of them, because we do not want those nasty bacteria in our guts making us feel ill. So there we go, almost done with my trainers. Just going to do a quick job of coloring this. All right, I'm just going to glue my trainers onto my little bacterium here. I'm going to put them right at the bottom so it almost looks like he's using them for shoes, or she's using them for shoes. I guess we don't know if it's a boy bacteria or girl bacteria. They don't have boys and girls in bacteria. They're only single cells. So there we go. We've got a bacteria with trainers on, and that bacteria is, after I eat the bacteria in the yogurt, that bacteria is going to run right to my intestines and protect me from any kind of nasty bacteria that might make me feel ill. Okay, so we've got, whoa, 2 cats now. Here's my other cat, Toby. Everyone say hi to Toby. Off the keyboard, Toby. Uh-oh, what happened? All right, I'm just going to stop sharing my screen. So hopefully everyone's gotten an idea of what you can do with these different pictures that I've given you, or remember, you can draw your own. Remember those ideas of different shapes of microbes that I showed you. So this is just an idea that not all microorganisms are bad for us. There are a lot of really good microorganisms that help us do really important things and keep us healthy and can be really good for the environment as well. So I hope you learned a lot from this activity. Please do go ahead and put any ideas or questions into the YouTube chat, and I'll try to get back to you. If you have made your organism and you want to show it to everyone, if you have an adult who can help you with this, you can take a photo of it and you can put it onto the Guiding Midlands Facebook page. And hopefully if we get a lot of entries of all of these different microbes that you girls have made, we can put them into a collage and we can leave them on the Guiding Midlands Facebook page, and everyone can see the brilliant microorganisms that you have come up with. So remember, not all organisms are bad. A lot of them do really, really good things for us. And hopefully today I've given you some ideas of what those different kind of good things are. So hopefully everyone's had a good time during the session. It was great to see all of you, and enjoy your day. And don't forget to put your questions into the chat, and don't forget, with an adult's help, if you want to put pictures of your microorganism on the Facebook page.